Cool. Thank you everyone for joining us today for Munch and Learn. We have Mike, Nick, Richard, I think Emlyn talking to us today from TravelSpace and Junction. Hopefully they're going to tell you all about how it came out of the Rail Innovation Group. So it's another success story. Hopefully there'll be some name checking coming along. There's actually no announcements for me before we start, except to say that we have another session next week at 12. So join us again next week at 12. But for now, I'm going to hand over to our speakers of the day. And you should
Thank you, Liam. Yeah, I'm going to kick us off. So hello, everybody. As I said, I'm Mike Lloyd, Managing Director at Junction. For those of you that don't know us, we are a digital rail application scale-up business based in Shoreditch in London. We've been working in the rail sector for about 5 years. Our goal is to be a market disruptor, and we're trying to bring a fresh and innovative approach to improving rail experience for passengers. I would imagine, like a lot of you, this last year has been a challenging one for Junction as a rail supplier, as for the whole of the rail industry. For Junction, most of our clients are TOCs, who've basically been effectively nationalised for 12 months and have largely paused spending on new projects while the new rail operations landscape's being sorted out. Fortunately, we had a number of contracts in place before that already, and we're now looking forward to the challenge of bringing passengers back to rail, hopefully through better customer experience and better performance. So one of the things we've been working on, we have a major new machine learning based decision support tool, which is going to be launched later on this spring. And hopefully Liam will give us a chance to talk about that at a later Rail Innovation Group meeting. Today, we'd like to talk about TravelSpace and get a Rail Innovation Group discussion going about the wider topic of bringing passengers back to rail this year, which is obviously of interest to everybody. I think this project is a very good example of how networking at Rail Innovation Group really works. So just before Christmas, I was introduced to Olivier Andre of Tractic through another Rail Innovation Group member, Simon Brown of Opal Rail. And we agreed to get involved with the TravelSpace team, Olivier, Richard and Nick, to build and roll out the TravelSpace product. So it's a project which we're really excited about, to be honest, and one which we feel can make a real difference in this area of bringing passengers back to rail with confidence. So without any further ado, what I'd like to do is hand over to Richard Fisher, who's going to tell you about the project. Over to you, Richard.
Thanks, Mike. Okay, everybody. So I'm going to make technology work, and I'm going to share my screen with you. Bear with me. I need to make it do a... There we go. So hopefully you can all see the TravelSpace slide deck now. I've said this to a couple of people before today's event, but this isn't a sales pitch. It's really important just to say that from the off. We're going to show you the exciting new product that we're developing with Junction. But actually what we're here to do is to find organisations who can help us scope out the functionality of the product and hopefully help us trial the product in a real railway environment. But first, let me tell you about the companies behind TravelSpace. Tractic Nickel Design, which is Nick Masadi's company, and 10 Transport Consultancy, which is my company, are a consortium of businesses. And we've developed the concept for TravelSpace, and we've appointed Junction as our developer and our UK distributor. Now, as Mike says, we've all come together through Rail Innovation Group. The other thing to say at this point is that we're actually funded by UKRI, and all of our funding, 100% of our funding, is grant funding from them. So we do have a relationship with them whereby we have to deliver a minimum viable product, which Mike is going to take you through later. But first, let's just quickly talk about the problem that we're trying to solve. We're going to be living with the effects of COVID for many years to come. And it's unlikely that the UK's economy is going to recover overnight from the coronavirus pandemic. We recognise that social distancing, but by its definition, it's not compatible with mass transit, and it's not compatible with busy commuter rail services. Measuring loadings or enforcing social distancing on a train only actually answers part of the question. Understanding and managing demand is the other half. And that's our understanding of demand as an industry, and sharing that information and sharing that demand knowledge with passengers so that they can make the right travel choices for them. We have national reservation system, as we know, but it doesn't fit all journey purposes, or rather it doesn't fit all user types. I live in Clapham. If I decide I'm just going to go and jump on a train to Epsom, I'm probably going to want the flexibility to just walk down to Clapham Junction, get on the train and go. I'm not going to want to book a seat. What TravelSpace does is gives me the opportunity to look at a train, understand how busy it is, and in a transactional relationship with the operator, inform the quality of that data by telling them what train I'm going to get on, rather than getting on a specific seat. But ultimately, most of our work is about needing to build confidence in the railway so that we can attract passengers back. And critically, when we think about passengers' confidence, let's think about the passengers who were most affected by the COVID pandemic. So how do we manage accessibility post-COVID for customers who were already struggling to use rail and now are finding it even harder? I'm going to hand over to Nick at that point.
Thanks, Rich. I just want to kind of, just picking up on Rich's point around kind of building confidence. This is I wanted to bring this slide to your attention. This is a piece of work. I did a piece of work when I was at HS2 we did a 6-month piece of ethnography work where we looked at the UK railway, and I wanted to use this slide from that piece of work because as part of the work we identified 6 kind of key anxieties that existed on the railway, and this was going back 4 or 5 years ago now, and equally the emotions that are associated with those. We've done a little bit of research around kind of trends and also what kind of moves and shakes in the actual railway in the UK, and I wanted to bring this slide up to draw your attention to that this is what the world looked like before COVID. And what COVID has done now is actually amplify all of these. These will still exist. These anxieties of tension, feeling overloaded, fearful, frustration, social anxiety, and the environmental aspects, they all still exist. But now what COVID has done is made that worse, and this has made it's compounded the problem for the rail companies to get people back and give them that confidence to say, oh, actually, I'm going to be safe when I travel on the railway. So I just wanted to put that in because I thought this was a really great piece of work that we kind of did at the time at HS2, but it's still kind of very relevant now. And if you move to the next slide, please, Rich.
Yes, Professor Whitty.
Thank you very much. So part of this was looking at people trends, and I didn't want to overload you today with lots and lots of stuff, but really there's some kind of key things that have kind of come from COVID, in particular thinking about the anxiety and the way that we live today. The world has changed very, very much in a very, very fast space of time, but we used to have this kind of frictionless kind of interaction, but now that this contactless piece as well has kind of come into the fray, and that is ever so more important. This is how people are communicating, how people are interacting with each other, because we can't do the physical side of things. There's also this notion as well that there's this real drive for empathy from people and this kind of personal touch. They're craving for this now because we've had a lack of contact. There is this empathetic piece as well that around the recognition, kind of acknowledging somebody's mood and emotions, and actually just general value for money, because everybody has kind of been stretched. This is all kind of relevant to the railway because obviously these are the customers that we want to get back to the railway. Equally, this kind of whole work, rest and play will kind of resonate with a lot of you, that this was around before COVID, but even more so now. People have been driven in a way to be more entrepreneurial with their whole kind of outlook on life, because actually of the constraints of the world that we live in right now, and not being able to travel, not being able to kind of go to work in the same way that we've all done. And also there's this health and well-being aspect. Everybody is fearful about getting COVID and obviously coming down. with some of the kind of the issues that people have had and that we've seen in the press recently. And then finally, off the back of all of that, there's this real kind of drive as well from a trend perspective that people are now kind of gravitating towards loyalty and the kind of meaningful exchange between between the transactional kind of piece between kind of the supplier or the kind of or whoever that might be and the actual customer can no longer it's no longer acceptable just to be transactional. It has to be more experiential and about developing networks and inspiration. So I'll hand back to Rich just to talk through some kind of other bits of research that we pulled out.
Yeah, so we've spoken at length with Transport Focus about their research, and we agreed that I was going to talk through this because actually some of these ring true to me from my career in the railway. So this first one here from a 32-year-old male in the East Midlands. More trains and more carriages at large football games than using human traffic lights. Well, that made me think about my own experience. I worked for Virgin Trains earlier in my career, and I can remember I worked at Euston for 3 years, around about 2005 onwards. And one of the things that we'd do on a night when I was on call is we'd stay later in the station to kind of see out the peak. And after the peak, you have this kind of rush of passengers coming down on saver tickets, trying to get out of London. And we had some trains in particular that we just knew were always oversubscribed. And one of the things that we did there was we would almost, I hate using the term, but we'd pen customers. So we'd put them aside. So you come down the ramp at Euston, passengers with a reservation walk through. Customers who had open tickets will be put to one side. And we just do a kind of boarding pass system. Literally, we just kind of take a printed ticket, we'd write a number on it, and we'd dish out the first 50 because we knew that we could squeeze 50 people on. And then once we'd got all the people on with reservations, we'd let through the first 50, and then one of us would walk down the platform, see how busy the train was, and then get on the radio and say how many more we could accept. TravelSpace is addressing that in the sense that we're trying to digitize it. What we're trying to do in the world of COVID, where we're trying to keep people from bunching up together in a pen, is to encourage people to only come to the station when they know the train is coming and they can get on it. Moving on, talking about people who have short notice, need to travel short notice, open flexible tickets, so they have meetings, they don't know when they're finished. The advantage of advanced purchase tickets is that they're cost effective, but you know that you're stuck on that train. How many business travellers do we know might travel to London on an advanced purchase in the morning and then in the afternoon have an open ticket going back? And that made us think about how TravelSpace could still allow people to make reservations flexibly. We thought about what Cross Country did about enabling people to make a seat reservation while the train is in service. The idea with TravelSpace is that up until the point you can get on that train, you can see how busy it is and confirm back to the train operating company that you're going to get on it. There's probably an interesting point here to make about the use of TravelSpace, and one of the questions that we often get is, how do we enforce it? Is TravelSpace going to produce a boarding pass? And there's not an answer to that. In short, what we need now is a TOC to help us with this development. We've built in the functionality in the TravelSpace app so that we could go down the route of enforcement, producing QR-coded boarding passes, so that TOCs can say, you have to have this before you travel. But I look at it more as a way to encourage dialogue between customer and train operating company, so that the TOC says, we'll provide you with demand data to tell you how busy the trains are and enable you to make the right choices. But the trade-off for that, what I want in return, is for you to tell me when you're going to travel, so that data is improved and relevant for the next customers. There's obviously, this theme is repeated here. If I kind of move on here, the kind of key headline for us, as you can see here in red, is that 54% of passengers surveyed don't feel safe when making a journey by train. People are anxious about travel anyway, even before COVID. As a railway person, I'm lucky. I can go and get on a train. It's no problem to me. I know where I'm going. But there are large swathes of the population that don't have that confidence and that comfort with it. And COVID has made that worse for people. They're anxious about rail travel anyway. They're now anxious about COVID. They're anxious about their proximity to other people. And right now they're asking themselves, if I had to make a journey by train, would I feel safe? And as you can see here, 54% of people don't. Moving on to another piece of research, again from Transport Focus, 49% of people who were surveyed thought that train reservations were a good idea. But of course, as we know, not every TOC is set up for seat reservations. Many of the commuter services around London just don't have numerical seat numbers, so they couldn't apply that if they wanted to. So what they need is a way for people to reserve their space rather than reserving a seat. And with that, I'm just going to pass back. Pass back to Nick. Yes.
So we're going to tell you a bit more now. That's a kind of really good kind of segue into the TravelSpace product and the kind of work that we've been doing with Mike and team at Junction to develop a tool for not just the customers, but for the operators as well. We see this as a kind of multi-tool, so it's a multifaceted kind of product. First of all, we see this as a tool that will attract customers back to the UK Railway, as Rich has mentioned, but equally, in turn, something that will reduce anxiety, as we've spoken about at the beginning of this presentation. Also, that where they can see in real time that where availability may need to be increased or decreased, and obviously allow then in turn staff to kind of preempt and deal with challenges more effectively because they know about them in real time. And then also there's this side of things, which is something that doesn't happen effectively always within the railway, is around the data management and disruption. And this could be a tool eventually that could actually help the operators manage disruption in a more effective way by giving them the ability to kind of have a single source of the truth, to promote a single source of the truth back to the customers. And then finally, there's a point here as well. I'm thinking about the accessibility piece, which is in sharp focus these days, as more and more people obviously are living longer. We've got obviously more people as well who have been affected by COVID. Then we need to make sure that the accessibility side of things is taken care of. And in particular, there could be an opportunity here for TravelSpace to effectively manage vulnerable customers in a better way.
And just picking up on what Nick said there about disruption of vulnerable customers, one of the strengths of TravelSpace, the core system that we've designed, is that by being plugged into Darwin, TravelSpace can notify passengers that the journey that they're proposing to take has been affected, and can actually propose to them what alternative services to take. Now that's quite powerful for vulnerable customers who, by very nature, have to plan a little bit more ahead than people who are more able.
So then the flip side of that is obviously the customer, the default piece, and how is this going to enable the customer? Well, again, there's the reducing the travel anxiety piece by building kind of passenger confidence, the fact that they can actually see the travel kind of capacity data in real time for them, so they can make an informed choice on whether they want to travel or not. Equally, it creates this kind of management around disruption. There's the reverse, where the operator is in communication with the customer, then they can also make their own decision around disruption and choose to take a different route or not travel. But it really is about, at the moment, the railway, in particular, commuter side of things, doesn't really allow the customer to be that empowered with their decision making around the journeys. But I think what we believe is that TravelSpace has the power to unlock some of the kind of restriction that exists in the UK railway today. We need a lot of other things to happen, but this is kind of one tool that might actually start to kind of create more of a movement for better customer experience. And then there's again, as we said, it comes back to the accessibility needs. It's enabling customers with accessibility needs to become more confident when traveling. They get that kind of framed view of their travel experience, whereas at the moment it can be feels like a bit of a wing and a prayer for them, because they can't see what the actual reality of the situation is before they travel. So these are some kind of snapshots of the app that we've been developing with Mike and team, and where we are right now. We're setting out to kind of develop this as a minimum viable product, and we want it to be as simple as possible to get the minimum viable product off the ground. First and foremost, there's kind of four kind of key stages really, which is the search for your train, and we hope that because if it's on your device, then you'll know where you are as well. So there'll be some intelligence behind that as well. You can then check how busy the train is, and you can see, as you can see on the middle slide, around the 7-day average there tells you how busy the trains were on that particular route. You can see the kind of the availability as well on that particular slide, but also there's below it as well. There's the alternative. I think there's alternative routes as well that are available to you, and then finally there's then the reserve the place to travel with confidence, which is basically, you can, again, on this kind of snapshot, you can see that the train below has high capacity, whereas the other one has low, and therefore if you don't want to travel with a lot of people, then you can choose to actually wait to travel on the next train and make that kind of conscious decision to do that. But this isn't a seat reservation system. This is about reserving a space on the train and also giving you confidence to see with accuracy how kind of full the train is. And then the final one, which is the thing that we've been thinking about, is the kind of bit that we touched on right at the beginning, which is loyalty. And there's something that the railway doesn't do very well at the moment. There are some initiatives within certain train operating companies, but not all of them do it. So again, this is based on trying to get customers back to the railway and giving them confidence, giving them something back in return for the data that they provide us, is that the back end of this is that we have loyalty built in, so that the more that they travel, then the more that they're actually rewarded for traveling as well. I'll hand back to Rich now.
So as I said up front, we're not here to sell anything. What we are looking to find is a rail operator who we can partner with and collaborate with to help us scope out the functionality of TravelSpace, but also hopefully to conduct a trial in a live railway environment. Now, that doesn't have to be across an entire train operating company. We're quite happy for that to be a limited trial, possibly using a small subsection of services. We thought about a branch line. One of the kind of ideas that we had recently was it might even just be a subsection of customers. So for instance, if you have a busy school, college or university on your route, then we could engage with that organisation and say, can your people who are using the rail service use this app? What we need to do though is demonstrate that, quite bluntly, having received 6 figures of government money to develop this, that there's some appetite to test it in the real world. The program is fully funded, as I say. We're not looking for financial contributions. The program is under development. We actually started before the 21st of February. We are at the point now, and then the app images that you saw were real. They weren't mock-ups. They were screenshots took straight from the developer. So we're at the point now where the app is coming along, the back office is coming along, and we now need thinking about locking in some of those decisions that currently are flexible waiting input from the operator and preparing for a trial. And I'm going to now pass over to Mike, who's going to talk a little bit more about the MVP.
Thanks very much, Richard. So yeah, basically, what's the minimum viable product going to do? There's basically 2 parts to it. There's the customer end, which at the moment is represented by a standalone app, although I think probably in the longer term, and having had a number of discussions with operators and with RDG is that probably we'll be looking at providing some sort of API that would allow this service to be linked into existing apps, whether that's the TOC or others. But basically, there's two parts to it. There's the app part, and then there's the back office part, which is completely new. So basically the passenger buys their ticket in the normal way, and then subsequently they can choose then to reserve the space on the train using the app. And so obviously everything's coming in here real time. The back end system, which is operated by the train operator, it allows them to control in real time the social distancing, for example. So we can adjust by 1 meter, 1 meter plus, 2 meters, or none at all. And that could be done on a train by train basis, or across peak, or off peak, or whatever. And that's all run by the TOC. The passengers then see what the bookings are on the different trains, and they are able then to be sort of nudged into which train they might want to go on to if they're looking for a light service or whatever. At least it keeps them informed. So that way the operator will then also see in real time who's on the trains, how many people are there. We've got a lot more data. Obviously, at the moment, 1 or 2 operators are using gate data, for example, to try and do this, but this will give a much more accurate indication of who really is on those trains, particularly from going from some of the larger stations. We're also hoping to use some the real-time train loading information as well, so that we've got additional information. And Nick showed earlier the historic, which is the sort of information that's being used at present, sort of historic trend information on loading of different trains. Obviously, the problem with that generally is that it is historic and doesn't actually show the real picture. So if there is disruption, or there's an event on, or something else is happening, that isn't necessarily going to give an accurate indication of how many people are on there, whereas TravelSpace will do. Next slide, please, Richard. So what's basically the MVP point, we're going to have Apple and Android versions, and usual, basically, as it says here, set up an account. Usual sort of thing, they'll get booking confirmations, they'll be able to change their bookings, view their previous journeys. So it will work very much like a sort of journey planner type application that you'll be familiar with at the moment. But as Richard mentioned, it's all linked into Darwin, and if, for example, the trains are delayed, they'll get messaging, and they'll be able to adjust their booking and look at what the loadings are on other trains as well. Next slide, please, Richard. So the back-end side is a web-based system, and that basically takes all the details of the fleet, the unit diagrams, the train capacities, seats, etc. All of that is fed in and linked to the real-time running of the trains from Darwin. Passengers can book ahead as far as they would go with the normal horizon for booking tickets. And yeah, get all the information that you'd normally expect to see on a ticket booking app. One of the things that the system for the train operator allows to do is it can reserve various spaces within the train. So, for example, if you need to reserve spaces for accessibility for disabled passengers, or for train operating company staff that have got to move to their next locations to do the next job. You can use those sliders to reserve some capacity and manage it. So it's quite flexible. And of course, lots of data can be produced out of it as well. And I think this will obviously help informing the situation. Clearly, we know, I mean, those of you who've been following all the conferences, constantly the information is changing about what the expectation is over the next few years. We're now talking about the possibility of third waves, with demand could go up and down. So something is needed to try and help that, and to help the train operator. I've just seen a question coming up on the chat. that from Chris saying requiring customers to download and install a new app. As Richard's mentioned already, the trials and the MVP has been funded through Innovate UK, and as part of that, so those of you who've had an Innovate UK project will know that you have to tick all the boxes, deliver all the bits in there, and that included a standalone app in order to test the system. But you're quite right, the way we would see this working in the longer term is most likely through an API into the train operator's app or into other apps that are being used, third-party apps as well, and making that available through a secure API. Next slide, please, Richard. I think are we back to you now?
Yeah, so I'll just quickly talk about TravelSpace's potential of the platform. Mike has just said that TravelSpace as an app exists primarily just to meet our contractual requirement of giving UKRI something tangible and physical. We kind of treat TravelSpace, to use an automotive term, a little bit like a development mule. So we've built a chassis and we can pop different options into it to use it, test it, and then when that functionality is proven within TravelSpace, then that API is then released to the market. So TravelSpace as a platform for development has got various different potential uses that the consortium and Junction are looking at together. So obviously we've spoken today about checking how busy a train is and reserving a place for COVID. Now, TravelSpace isn't just a short-term solution to get through the pandemic. It's a part of a broader suite of products that we're developing. The managing social distancing and passenger loadings and collecting the demand data from that are relevant use cases of TravelSpace today. And as we say, that has to be an app for commercial purposes for UKRI. But once we've developed that MVP and proven that concept, then that gives us some credibility and experience to push on and develop future components and use cases, all of which we intend to test using the TravelSpace platform. So these include, as you can see here, flexible ticketing through all the way through to TravelSpace has been the handheld key to a mobility service platform, and that we integrated with other transport modes so that we can improve the connection of last mile connectivity with timetable rail services. We say here, we talk about carnet booking. We recognise that the carnet is a product. Our concept here is digitising the carnet as a proxy for eventual flexible ticketing. Delay repay is something quite interesting. The whole concept of proving that people were on a train. Obviously, we know that when they were Virgin trains, now Avanti, they introduced automated delay repay, which for customers on advanced purchase tickets handled the refund automatically. Well, that back office admin that we can take from there, or take that kind of process, we could overlay the TravelSpace so that customers on a train could prove they were on a train. The system would know they were delayed and could then handle their delay repay. The customer still initiates it, but what it does is it proves the customer's on the train, so it doesn't give people the opportunity of having a flexible ticket and looking up a train that was delayed that they weren't legitimately travelling on. Seat reservations and seat assurance are important to us. So these are future developments, not just about me booking a seat, but for the train operating company to know that I've taken that seat and offer me other services once I'm there. So food at my seat. And one of the conversations we've had recently as well is if I'm running late, moving that reservation somewhere else. We talk about incentive plans and loyalty, a better understanding of customer data and customer drivers so that we can target customers. If we're giving out rewards, and you know, we've had conversations with IAG about their Avios program, not to use it, but to understand how it works and how they can tweak that to incentivize people. So if we know that you are a flexible customer who can travel at any range of times, could we incentivize you through the loyalty scheme to travel maybe later or earlier when there's more capacity, when it's a better fit for the operator. And eventually, coming to bringing together all modes of transport into one movement as a service platform. So talking about that, this is our kind of roadmap for extra features. The roadmap for TravelSpace includes journey booking, eventual integration with ticketing and end-to-end mobility service. But what's critical here is that we talk to operators so that they pick off the different elements of the toolkit that they want that works for them. But some of the I've just spoken about some of the things we're going to do, but some of the other things we're looking at are powerful demand modeling tools that take various different forms of data and inputs that into TravelSpace, telling customers how busy trains are. And then through the TravelSpace API, through your own booking system, as a circular improvement, refining all the time the quality of your data.
Richard, Richard, there's one or two questions. Can I dive in and perhaps just pick up one or two of the points that are on the chat? Chris has raised a question here about saying, when customers reserve a space, what does that mean to the customer as it's not a seat? Isn't that adding a layer of confusion to customers? I think what we'll say on that is, as probably a lot of operators are doing now, is basically marking off and only making certain seats available. It's about giving confidence, I think. So it isn't a seat, but it is a space, and that's the point. And obviously, as Richard's already mentioned, a lot of these trains don't have seat numbers on already, and there will be certain seats marked out as being available, others not, which may change over time. So I think it's giving, the idea is to give customers confidence that yes, they do have a seat on the train. In terms of the turn up and go, question from Paul about what implications does this have for the turn up and go railway? I mean, I think there's big questions about how that's going to work. I don't think we know, and I think we're sort of participating in this really and trying to understand. It's going to change. Social distancing potentially can vary between the 1 metre, the 1 metre plus, the 2 metre, or none at all. We'll just have to sort of see how that goes. There's a question from Hayden about RAS 2, which has been rolled out over the last few months. My understanding, but I'm not a total expert on RAS 2, but my understanding is that at present, the ability to control the social distancing is not something that's built into RAS 2. So through an API, and we spoke to OneTalk about this, the possibility of linking TravelSpace in through an API into RAS 2 so that we could help managing the social distancing. So it would be an interesting area to look at. And Chris is saying again, how does it ensure social distancing? The key point is about managing the total numbers of people on the train. So Richard's done lots of calculations on different classes of trains and carriages about how many people you can get on one train and conform with the different social distancing distances.
I guess the question, sorry if I can just interrupt there, the question I think what that is getting at is, even if you were to say we can allow 400 people on the train, there's nothing in this system that stops the 300 people going into the end carriage because they want to get off early.
No, there is a requirement on passengers to use the information we give them sensibly. What we're saying is, if we know that a train conventionally can take 400 people, the operator may set a limit in TravelSpace to say any more than 200 people, you may not be able to social distance comfortably. So it's about giving passengers information and allowing them to make the right choices for them. But also there is an expectation in that, and just psychologically thinking, if they're going to use TravelSpace to conform with what we want them to do about checking what trains are busy and telling us what trains are, then they're probably quite likely to conform with social distancing. So it's about giving them the information, letting them make the right choices, and then act in the appropriate way. There is a credible challenge about what happens if people just turn up who don't use the app. If the TOC isn't going to enforce them, then there is a challenge that they'll all just get on. So what we have to do is we have to engage with our customers and say, this makes your experience better, including it into your app, so that when people are buying their tickets through the app, they're getting that information and using it appropriately is very important there.
I think that leads on to, sorry to interrupt you, just kind of taken over that. Chris J has put 2 more questions. So I think they're very relevant. So Chris, could you unmute yourself and just ask those questions?
There's actually 2.
Sorry.
Days. I think it's
I was going to say which one.
Chris J, who's...
Well, as the other Chris asked, didn't he?
Right. Okay. I'm going to read your questions. Whoever it was, give more as seats are available or not available, does this not rely on having a monopoly on reservations? And then the follow-up question about financial risk.
You want me to read that one?
Just ask a question.
Okay. So basically, where does the financial risk on this lie? So this is built on trust. So the trust that the consumer has in the system. If I book a ticket a few hours in advance and then rock up and the train is actually full when I believed it would be empty and I decide not to travel, am I entitled to a refund? If so, where does that money come from? Is it the TOC? Is it yourselves? So how do you translate that consumer trust into the financial risk of this?
So Chris, this is a tool for the TOC. So that it's not, TravelSpace is not the company that's actually managing the seats. It's a tool. So it's the TOC that is managing the seats on the train. It's very unlikely that you would look at a train and see that it would be completely empty, and when you get there, it would be completely full based on that situation. But essentially, the situation is the same. It's with the TOC. So we're not standing. We're not an intermediary between the TOC and the passenger. This is basically a tool to help TOCs manage the relationship with customers and manage confidence and demand.
Okay, so can I just slightly reframe it? That's slightly misunderstood. Okay, so let's say the TOC just tells the people that the train is empty, and then or not empty, but it's less busy than it is, and they then decide not to travel and request a refund for the ticket because they feel unsafe traveling, which is what I believe this is based on. Are you liable then because the information the TOC acted on was yours? Has there been any thought around that, or?
Well, the information that we'll be supplied with will come from the TOC and be validated by the TOC. So it's as good as their information.
I mean, it's a good question, Chris.
Yeah.
I think, and as Richard said, what we hear is we're here to try and understand some of the answers. No one knows all the answers to these questions at the moment. It's a new
that's fair. I'm just curious.
We're going into. Yeah, no, they're good questions. That's what I'm saying. I think they're really good questions, and we've got some of the answers, but not all of them. And getting those questions is really important. And I think that there's a question from George Robbins saying, if a TOC already has a reservation system, such as the long distance travellers, what's the value add? To be honest, at the moment, probably not a huge amount. It's primarily seen to begin with operators that do not run a seat booking system, such as the long distance operators. Although I have mentioned that I think, and again, someone who knows more about RAS2 can probably say more about this than me, is that currently it's not managing the social distancing factors in there. So that there may be a role in it for that.
When we envisage TravelSpace, we very clearly, as a kind of consortium of shareholders, said that the long distance reserved seat market is not the market we're looking at. We're looking at commuter routes around major cities with walk-up flows and an allocated seating.
There's a question from Hayden saying what levels of data accuracy are required for the service to be credible. I mean, I'd throw that back to you, Hayden. What do you think? I mean, as I say, we're here to listen and hear.
Well, in order to be a realistic service, you've got to have sufficient data accuracy from those data sources that you're coming in and correlate them and match them. So have you determined what level of accuracy you've got from your data sources coming in, and therefore what's required to make this a realistic service?
There's one of the questions that we have is that there are different options for data sources depending upon what the TOC wants. So if we worked independently of the TOC, to be honest, the data probably for more urban built-up areas might not be overly accurate, if I'm being honest. However, if we can work with the TOC and use their in-house data, so we've had conversations with TOCs about taking gate line data, which is more accurate, taking weight data from trains, which is very accurate, and then recycling that into the TravelSpace app. So we would prefer to use a data source that the TOC have provided themselves, because we feel that they have better accuracy. What we're not interested in doing, I'll add, is actually using ticket sales data, because we see the market share for this as being open ticket, season ticket, smart card customers.
Yeah, I mean, the data accuracy around season tickets is
shocking.
I think there's another question coming from George as well. If that's, I don't know which of you can answer that one.
Well, I think it's not necessarily a question that we can answer, because it's a question for the TOC, really, George. I think it's that what we're saying is we can provide the tool. We're not physically going to be enforcing it, but in the same way that, you know, a seat reservation isn't physically enforced. You know, if I book a seat on East Midlands Railway, you know, the booking system is not enforcing that either. So I think these are questions for TOCs. And as Richard said, the plan is, once we get to the minimum viable product at the end of April, to be then running hopefully a several-week trial. And at that point, we'll probably hopefully have a lot more answers to these questions. But it's something we need to work with. I don't think anyone has the answers to all of these questions at the moment. That's really what we're trying to do, is we're trying to say, as we move into this new world, you know, we've got to find new ways of trying to manage it. This is a one way forward, but it's got to have to be done in collaboration with the TOCs and with the other stakeholders in this situation. And, you know, we're really keen to hear any ideas and inputs that people have got.
I can't see the questions until, oh, there we go, they've just popped up again. I couldn't see George's question until now, but quite often the question I'm asked is, how do we enforce it? And the answer that I give is that that's not for us to tell you, because we don't necessarily think that that's right for all use cases. What we want you to do is to use the data and share that data with your customers. If you choose to enforce it by using QR codes on barriers, for instance, then that's up to you. But actually, what TravelSpace is a tool for you to use how you see fit in your organisation. And we recognise it's not fit for all use purposes, but for some, it is. I'm going to move off this slide and just kind of, for the last couple of seconds, leave our contact details here. So these are my details if anybody wants to get hold of me. And I'll just give you a second with that, and then I'll move on to, we've got Emlyn's details up here. So I'll move on now. So if anybody wants to contact Emlyn, but get in touch with either of us if you want to talk about working with us to develop the concept a little bit better. If you want to help by giving us some input. One of the things that we have said recently is we might try and form an advisory panel of experts in the industry who can give us suggestions for how we develop going forward, coming to some of these critical decisions that we have to make. Now, we're funded by UKRI. The funding has been allocated, so we can't pay anybody for that. But, you know, you might get a John Lewis voucher out of me or a bottle of wine.
Right. I'm going to have to cut you off there, Richard, because we need to draw it to a close, because I think lots of people are dropping off for their other meetings.
I'm done now anyway.
Thank you very much for your time. And it's probably a good thing to say we look forward to hearing the progress when we can all meet up in person come summer, which we will definitely be doing. But otherwise, thank you for talking to us about this. If anyone has any questions or needs to get in touch, you can either come through me or use those email addresses that were on the screen. But otherwise, join us again at noon next week, and I'll send out details about that after this meeting. But otherwise, thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, everyone.
Thanks, guys.
Cheers all. Bye.